I look at political documents all of the time, and it seemed to me that the PC platform essentially said, we're going to get rid of the Ontario cap and trade system, we're going to fall back on the federal regime because, in part, I think the federal government has said that any carbon taxes that they collect will be returned to the province where that carbon tax comes from. And this was how Patrick Brown was going to fund things like an income tax cut.
Right.
Is that right?
Right. But
So,
there's been a twist since then. So in the exciting world of all this, so in the regulatory proposal that the feds came out with earlier this year about the federal backstop, it says that if you agree to be part of this, if you allow the federal government to impose this tax in your jurisdiction, the money will still go to your jurisdiction and you have full right to say where that money goes. If you don't, if it has to be forced upon you, the federal government can actually decide how it's spent. It can go directly to the taxpayers through the federal side, or they can do it through the province, but it's really up to the federal government to decide how the taxpayers, how that money is spent in that jurisdiction, which puts a bit the PC platform and where the current leadership wants to go with this in a bit of a sticky situation, because if they hold out, they may lose and they don't win a constitutional challenge against all of this, like Saskatchewan wants to do, they could essentially lose power over where that money goes.
Right. And did Manitoba also, you mentioned Manitoba and Saskatchewan initially didn't sign on, but I think Manitoba since then has come around.
They have come around. I think they looked into it. They were looking to look at the Constitution and see if the federal government was in the right to do this. I think we've all seen the federal government can impose tax where they see fit. And so Manitoba said, okay, we're going to be part of this, and they're actually coming up with their own carbon tax system right now, provided that it's up to snuff to the federal government. So they've signed on.
Okay, so back to Ontario then, when the PC leadership candidates say, we're not going to do a carbon tax, and at least a couple of them have said, and if the federal government tries to force us to do one, we'll take them to court. This is that constitutional challenge you referenced a minute ago? So Manitoba looked at that and said, we probably are not going to win that, so we might as well do a carbon regime on our own, right? Okay, so we're not lawyers,
no,
but in the most likely scenario then, if the PCs win the election in June and they do, I'm not saying that's the most likely scenario, they probably won't get the federal government off of this, either constitutionally or however.
Right.
So does that mean, what does that mean if you're one of these companies that bought carbon credits at auction through the cap and trade system that you've spent quite a bit of money on, and now can you sell those credits into Quebec and California, maybe at a discount? What happens then?
That's a good question, and I don't think it's been fully fleshed out. I'm sure that I would assume that in the Western Climate Initiative there are rules around what happens if a jurisdiction pulls out, but I don't know if an industry or a emitter will have the ability to sell those credits back into the system and get that money back. In the People's Guarantee, there was discussion about how to manage that transition. If we're following that one, that the emitters could get some type of credit going into a carbon tax system going forward, but it wouldn't be. I don't know how those proposals align with the actual rules under the Western Climate Initiative. I think there would be some upset people in industry who have invested internal infrastructure in adapting to cap and trade, and also seeing, nobody wants uncertainty, especially in these days, but business especially, they don't want to see uncertainty in terms of how they're going to adhere to these things. They just want a straightforward plan. So I think there would be a lot of consternation on the side of industry and concern about the back and forth of this and what it means for them and their obligations.